I never thought that that Thursday afternoon would change my life forever. I live in Guanajuato, a colonial city full of tunnels, history, and legends. I am 50 years old, my name is Mauricio Ortega, and I have worked all my life as an electrical technician. Nothing out of the ordinary. Father of 2 children, divorced for years, believer but not fanatic, like many in this land of contrasts. That day, I was checking an electrical substation on the outskirts of the city, in an area where the terrain is uneven and dry. The heat was suffocating. I had been under the sun for more than 4 hours, with the constant hum of transformers in my ears, when I felt a sharp pain in my chest. I got dizzy. I remember leaning against a fuse box, trying to breathe deeply, but the air wouldn't come in. It was a second, or several, I don't know. I only know that everything turned white, not dark as one would think, but white, like a thick, luminous fog. I stopped feeling my body. There was no pain, there was no time. And then I understood. I was dying. First I thought it was a dream, but I had never had a dream so real. It was like I was floating. I saw myself from above. I saw my body lying on the dirt floor, the tool still in my hand. I saw how the paramedics arrived, how they tried to revive me. And I just floated, at peace, without fear. That's when I felt like someone was watching me. I turned, or rather, my consciousness turned. A huge luminous figure appeared in front of me, with a presence that I cannot describe with human words. It had no wings, but it radiated an energy that brought me to my knees, even though I no longer had a physical body. He didn't speak with a voice, but he spoke directly to my soul. "Mauricio," he said with infinite softness, "it is not your time yet, but you have been allowed to see." "See what?" I asked, without a mouth but with clarity in my thoughts. "See what is to come, because you will be a witness before many, and you must tell what you saw, even if they doubt you." Everything around me began to transform. We left the place where my body was and traveled through a tunnel of light, as if we were flying at impossible speed through a conduit of living energy. In the end, we arrived at a valley of a beauty that made me cry, if you can cry without eyes. Mountains of crystals, rivers that sang, trees that shone with their own consciousness. Everything there seemed to have a soul. Everything loved me, and I loved them all. It was in that valley where I received the first revelation, but I did not move forward yet. Because before that, he had to understand that what he was about to witness was not a punishment, but a calling. His warning. I still didn't know what I was going to hear, but my spirit trembled, because something very big was about to be revealed. The valley was immense, as if it had no end. But it wasn't a physical place. I understood that almost immediately. There was no horizon, and yet there was direction. There was no sun, but everything shone with a warm, loving light that illuminated everything from within. I felt like every leaf, every drop of the rivers knew me. Not only did they know my name, they knew my wounds, my mistakes, my darkest thoughts. And despite all that, they accepted me. I walked without feet through that place. It was like floating on air, but with the feeling of being completely supported. With each step, if that can be called a step, I felt my soul lighten, as if entire layers of pain were peeling off of me without the need for words. He had no body, but he did have full consciousness, fuller than ever. I saw other beings in the distance. Some looked like people, others were just shapes of light, floating spheres of impossible colors, and still others were like children, made of white fire with faces so pure that I couldn't look at them without my spirit shaking. One of them approached. He was smaller, about the height of a young man, but his presence was immensely ancient. His eyes were 2 living stars. He spoke to me sweetly, like someone meeting an old friend after many lives. "You have been called, Mauricio, not to judge, but to announce," he told me. I didn't understand. Announce what? Whom? Why me? "I'm nobody," I answered mentally, with a mixture of humility and fear. The being smiled. It was a smile that had no lips, but that illuminated the entire space, precisely for that reason. Because you don't seek to be someone, you can receive it. Then he took me to a higher place within the valley, a kind of viewpoint that opened onto a plain that seemed to contain time. In front of me, a kind of water mirror began to form images. First I saw the Pope. I recognized him immediately. He was old, with a tired face, surrounded by silence. Around them, cardinals and bishops spoke among themselves, but their faces were covered in shadows. Then the Pope closed his eyes, and the water in the mirror shook violently. When the shepherd returns home, the world will know 3 signs, said the being of light. At that moment, the water began to show different images: entire cities in darkness, people running desperately, planes without radar, collapsed power stations. Then I saw flags of different nations waving in flames. There was no sound, but the pain was palpable. Finally, I saw financial markets collapsing like dominoes, rich people crying, poor people hungry, and chaos installed in the big capitals. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. It was as if my soul was anchored to that vision. "It's not a punishment, it's a consequence," said the being. "But there is still time." "What can I do?" I asked, terrified. "Speaks. Tell it. Even if they make fun of you, even if they call you crazy, you are not alone." He took my hand, if you can say that, and showed me something else. A crowd of people who, like me, were waking up. People in different parts of the world who were beginning to see, to feel, to remember. Many have been called. You are one of them. Not because of your merits, but because of your willingness to listen. Then I understood. He was not the protagonist. He was a messenger. And the message he had received was as sacred as it was dangerous, because whoever heard it would have to choose, believe, or ignore. I was still standing, or floating, in front of the reflecting pool that had shown the 3 events that would follow the Pope's death. The anguish of what I saw had me broken inside, if one can be inside on a plane like that. The voice of the being that accompanied me was a constant balm, but also a call to action. I felt small, so small in front of everything I was seeing. That's when I smelled a scent. I can't describe it well. It was a mixture of freshly baked bread, bougainvillea flowers, and something else. Something that has no name on earth. That smell passed through me like a wave of tenderness, and without warning, a figure emerged from the bottom of the valley. He was walking towards me. It was a woman. His face was young, but his eyes retained the depth of age. I couldn't believe it. "Mother?" I said without voice, only thought. She nodded. His smile was the same one he greeted me with when I came home from school. But now it was brighter. She had a dress made of liquid light, and her body radiated a peace that was impossible to imitate. I ran towards her, or tried to. On that plane, time and space do not function as they do here. When I wanted to hug her, she was already in my arms, or rather, our energies merged in the same hug. I felt all his love in a single explosion of joy. I cried with my soul. I cried like I have never cried in my life. "You're not alone, son," he told me, "and what you are seeing is not to scare you. It's to prepare you." "Why me, Mom? Why not someone wiser, stronger?" "Because you have suffered in silence. You have silenced your pain. You have served others. And in your heart, even without knowing it, you have asked to see the truth." E.T. took me by the hand along a path into the valley. Each step opened different landscapes: hanging gardens, temples made of living energy, libraries where books flew and sang. He showed me a fountain of water that did not wet, but healed. And there, with a voice that was not his, but one that came from beyond, he told me, "Listen with your soul, Mauricio." Then words were no longer necessary. Ideas began to arrive in the form of light, images, melodies. I understood that many people were receiving these messages, but few would dare to speak out. Some would be ignored, others persecuted, but they would all be necessary. I saw faces, people I don't know yet, men, women, young people, old people. They were all connected to each other by golden threads, as if an invisible spiritual network had united them before birth. I was also part of that network. The network of witnesses, my mother said. They will be the ones who will sustain hope when the pillars of the world shake. "What exactly will happen after the Pope dies?" I asked fearfully. That will be shown to you. But first, you must pass through the threshold of truth. Only there you will understand the full purpose. His figure began to fade, but his essence stayed with me. I loved her more than ever, and I understood that on that level, love is not a feeling, it is a force. It is raw material. It is what keeps everything that exists alive. After my mother's figure faded, the scenery began to change. The luminous valley that had filled me with comfort began to fade, as if it were a dream that was slowly dissolving. What came next wasn't darkness. It was intensity. As if the light had condensed into millions of particles that vibrated around me, each one with a purpose. The being of light that had accompanied me from the beginning appeared again, although this time its energy was more solemn, more serious. He extended his arm, or whatever shape he used to represent it, and a path of floating crystals appeared in front of me. In the background, a kind of gigantic arch, made of a golden and liquid substance at the same time, pulsed like a living heart. You have been prepared. Now you will cross the threshold of truth, he told me. What's on the other side? What your soul always knew but your mind forgot, and what you must remember to do your part. I took the first step and felt a pressure on my chest, not painful but forceful, as if something inside me expanded. The air, if that was air, vibrated with songs that came from nowhere. Voices, thousands of voices, some human, others like instruments, all saying one thing: remember. Upon reaching the threshold, a dense energy enveloped me. It wasn't fear, it was reverence. I knew I was entering a zone where everything would be seen as it is, without filters, without lies, without illusions. Crossing. On the other side there was not a place, but a state. It was like being inside a gigantic consciousness. The walls were memories, the ground, intuitions. Everything he had thought, said, done, was there. But it wasn't just my life. There were many. Lives that I didn't know were mine, but when I saw them, I knew they were. I saw my repeated mistakes, my acts of silent love, my betrayals, my redemptions. And then I saw the earth. I saw it from above, but not as a satellite. I saw her as a living being, breathing, crying, singing. Its rivers were veins, his mountains, bones, its forests, lungs. I saw how her energy was absorbed by man-made structures, systems that drained her without giving anything back. The balance has been broken, said a voice. It was not that of the being that guided me. This was another, deeper, older. The Pope, as a spiritual figure with global reach, maintains an important part of the balance with his prayer. When your soul leaves the body, the vibration that keeps certain forces contained will weaken. Then, I watched all three events again, but in more detail. The first event, a major blackout, not only electrical but communicational, a global silence, downed satellites, silent social networks, a mandatory break. The second event, a sudden increase in conflicts between nations. I saw broken treaties, leaders accusing each other, weapons moving in the shadows, not a total war but the prelude. The third event, the great financial crash, closed bags, banks freezing accounts, people losing life savings, a kind of forced reset. And after that, I asked with a knot in my soul, you are not allowed to see beyond. Not yet. And what should I do? Speak, Mauricio, warn, prepare. But don't sow fear, sow awareness. The threshold began to close, and with it a certainty was engraved in me like fire on stone. What I had seen would happen. And I had to tell everything, although no one believed it. When the threshold of truth closed behind me, I felt that something within my being had changed forever. He was no longer the same Mauricio who had collapsed on the dry land of Guanajuato. Although he still had no physical body, he had an inner clarity that he had never known in earthly life. It was as if all my senses had multiplied by 1,000. He could perceive distant thoughts, emotions of other beings, even the vibration of words before they were spoken. The being of light took me again and told me, "You have seen what you should have seen. Now I'll show you why." We flew, if you can call it that, through a sky that was not sky, but pure consciousness. The stars seemed to move intelligently, as if they were guardians of the path. Finally, we arrive at a majestic structure suspended in the middle of the void, but not empty of anything, but empty of the unnecessary. It was a temple, not made of stone, but of living wisdom. Its columns were thoughts, its walls were formed by ancient languages that wrote themselves in the air with golden fire. Upon entering, a chorus of voices greeted us. They were not human songs. They were like sighs from the universe, words without language that pierced my soul. And then I saw them. Sitting in a circle in the middle of that temple, there were 7 beings. They were not men or women nor angels as we imagined them. They were consciousnesses embodied in forms that my mind could barely tolerate, geometric figures that changed with every thought, colors that do not exist in our world, lights that contained entire stories. One of them spoke. The human soul learns through contrast. Where there is no shadow, light is not valued. Another continued, every global crisis is a birth. Painful, yes, but necessary for something new to be born. I listened to them with reverence, not fully understanding, but feeling each word as absolute truth. Is there no other way to wake up, I asked. Does it have to be through suffering? It is not the only way, said the third, but it is the quickest for a sleeping humanity. They showed me images of ancient civilizations that also received warnings. Atlantis, Egypt, the native peoples of America. In all those times, there were those who saw what was coming and were ignored. And yet, there were also those who listened and sowed the seeds that centuries later germinated into new forms of life. You are not the first, nor will you be the last, the fourth being told me, but your time is now. I then saw many people like me, common people, bakers, teachers, single mothers, confused young people. They had all had encounters similar to mine, and everyone had a spark in their chest, a spark that pushed them to speak, to warn, to illuminate. The world will not be destroyed, said the fifth being. It will be revealed. Revealed how? When? The structures fall. The soul will have to choose, rebuild the same and/or awaken to something new. I knelt down, not out of submission but out of gratitude. I was understanding that the mission was not to save the world, but to remind the world who it is. And if that had to happen through the darkness of chaos, then it wasn't a punishment. It was an opportunity. You will have doubts, you will feel afraid, some will make fun of you. But you are not alone, said the seventh being. We will always be with you, in your dreams, in your silences, in your voice. And then the temple began to fade, and with it, the choir, the colors, the symbols. But one thing remained engraved in me with an indescribable force. Every person who hears this message will know in their soul that it is true, because souls do not forget. They just sleep. After the suspended temple faded away, I felt myself floating in a shapeless, directionless space. But there was no fear, no confusion. It was like being held by something immensely wise. The being of light that had accompanied me from the beginning reappeared, this time closer, more familiar. I no longer saw him as an alien figure, but as an extension of something that had always been with me. Now you will see the origin of your path, he told me, and you will understand why you are where you are. A soft glow began to surround us, and soon a new space emerged, a kind of immense circular room without a roof or defined walls. But it wasn't a building. It was a shared consciousness. I felt like I was entering the very heart of the collective soul. Thousands of lights floated inside the room, each one different, each one alive. Some as big as suns, others small, but intense. They weren't lights and they were souls, souls waiting for their moment to incarnate, souls that chose where, when, and with whom to return to Earth. I approached one of them, which vibrated with a deep blue color. And when I touched it with my conscience, I saw its story. Not a linear story, but a spiral of experiences, learnings, wounds, and decisions. I saw that that soul had asked to be born in the middle of a war, to learn to forgive. Another had asked, to be born with a disability, to teach compassion. And another one, to lose everything and discover that the material does not define the value of being. Then I understood something that left me breathless. If you can lose your breath at that level, many of the tragedies we see on earth are choices, not punishments, not accidents, pacts. The being of light spoke to me again. Before each life, the soul decides who it will meet, what challenges it will face, and what lessons it will seek to learn. Nothing is imposed. Everything is agreed upon in love. I saw a scene that shook me. It was me before I was born, surrounded by other souls. Some would be my family, others my enemies, others simple strangers with whom I would have brief but decisive encounters. And I saw that, in that moment, I accepted a mission to live an ordinary life full of effort without recognition, but with a moment of profound awakening that, if I managed to go through it, would allow me to remember and speak. You chose the difficult route, the being told me, because you knew that in the simple, the sacred is hidden. I then saw the souls that are preparing to incarnate in this generation, many of them more awake, more luminous. I saw unborn children with immense missions, and I also saw souls that do not want to return, that they have lost faith in humanity. And what happens to them? I asked. They wait, and they pray for you. Even if they don't know it, there are souls on the other side supporting those who still walk the earth. The connection is never broken. I sat down or felt like I was stopping in the middle of the room. An overwhelming peace washed over me. All was not lost. The chaos I saw in the visions was real, but so was the larger plan. One where darkness does not win, it only reveals what is no longer useful. Get ready, Mauricio, the being of light told me. Your return is near, and before we go back, there's something else you should know, something that will change the way you see even those who hurt. I asked Sadie, what is it? The truth about forgiveness and the origin of evil. The lights in the living room began to merge into a single glow, and I knew that what was coming would be even deeper. The decision room faded into light, like a fog that melts into the dawn. I felt different. I was no longer just a witness. I now felt like I was part of something much bigger than my own story. Even so, the weight of what I still needed to understand was clear, and it was then that the being of light spoke to me again. You've seen the plan. Now you must see what tests him. A crack in space appeared in front of me. It wasn't physical. It was like a wound in the conscience, a fissure through which something dense, heavy, dark seeped. For a moment I felt fear, but the being placed a kind of mantle of light over my soul, and I was able to move forward. By crossing that crack, everything changed. It was a dry, grey, colourless landscape. It was not infernal, as described in the sacred books, but it was devoid of beauty. There were no songs heard, nor was love felt, but there was something that hurt. I saw figures walking slowly, like shadows that had forgotten their origin. Some had human faces, others were distorted by hatred, pride, greed, and I understood they were souls. They are not demons, the being explained to me. They are beings that have moved so far from the light that they no longer recognize it as theirs. I shuddered. I thought of cruel people, of criminals, of corrupt leaders. Was it possible that they were also souls with sacred origin? All souls come from the source, he said, but some are lost, not by punishment, but by choice, and free will is sacred, even to those who choose darkness. Then I saw scenes from the human world, betrayals, violence, wiles, everything that breaks the innocence of a life, and I felt a question arise from my essence. How can there be forgiveness for those who consciously cause harm? The answer came without judgment, but with a force that passed through me. Forgiveness is not acceptance of evil. It is liberation of the soul. You don't forgive yourself for the other. He forgives himself so as not to poison himself with the same pain. I then saw my own life, to those who betrayed me, who humiliated me in my youth, who stole part of my livelihood, and I understood that by not forgiving I had kept alive a flame that only burned my spirit. Forgiveness was not excusing. It was letting go of the rope that tied me to pain, and I also saw the opposite, those I had hurt, not with violence but with words, with indifference, with selfishness. I understood that all of us at some point had been villains in someone else's story, and yet we were all redeemable. Then I saw a gesture that changed me forever. One of the souls warped by darkness looked up. For the first time, his face was that of a man who had done a lot of harm, but a tear, just one, rolled down her cheek. At that moment, a crack of light passed through him. When a lost soul remembers love, even for a second, the entire heaven trembles with joy, the being told me. And there I understood it. Even in the times to come, when the world falls into chaos after the death of the Pope, when hatred and confusion seem to dominate, the only real answer will be forgiveness, not as weakness, but like alchemy. Because to forgive is to remember that the light is still alive, even in the densest shadows. After the revelation about forgiveness and the origin of evil, I felt that an inner door had opened within me. It wasn't just knowledge, it was transformation. I felt like my soul was vibrating differently, as if the light that had enveloped me from the beginning now burst forth from myself. The being that had guided me to that point remained silent, watching me tenderly. "You've come almost all the way," he finally told me, "but there is still a voice missing, a presence that you must listen to before returning." I didn't ask anything. I felt it coming. The space around me was transfigured. There was no longer any ground, no sky, no shapes, just a golden immensity, as if I had become a thought floating in the heart of God. And then, in front of me, an immense, majestic, imposing presence descended. It wasn't just light. It was order, power, justice, and compassion in one form. I felt like my entire being wanted to bow down, and I did it, not out of fear, but out of recognition. "I'm Michael," he said without speaking. His voice echoed within me, like the echo of all the thunders of creation. It was Archangel Michael. It had a human form, yes, but it was also more than that. He had wings that were not wings, but extensions of pure will. His face was serene, but firm. His gaze did not judge. It penetrated. I saw in his eyes cosmic battles, planets being born and dying, humanity praying and forgetting. "Mauricio Ortega from Guanajuato," he said. "You have been called, and you have responded. Hear now what not many have heard." The air, or whatever that environment was, grew thick. Michael extended his arm, and a kind of ethereal clock suspended in the air appeared. I didn't have numbers. It had ancient symbols, constellations, fragments of scriptures that I didn't understand but recognized in my soul. The watch vibrated, and a mark of light turned on above it. "When the shepherd crosses the veil," he said, referring to the Pope, "the clock will begin. 3 signs will fall like stones on the lake of the world. Each one will cause waves that will touch hearts." "Which will be the first?" I asked, although I had already seen images of the blackout. "It won't just be a power outage. It will be the forced silence that will make humanity listen to what it has always avoided. It will also be the fall of false messages. The truth and the lie will come face to face." Then I saw cities turned off, but I also saw candles lit in humble homes, families gathered without screens, people praying, meditating, looking at the sky. The conflict between nations will come later. It won't be an open war, none yet, but it will be enough to divide, to confuse, to awaken fear. Hearts will harden, others will open like flowers in a storm. And finally, the financial collapse. I saw it again. But this time, the Archangel showed me something else. Support networks between neighbors. Barter. Communities that were reborn from below. Some will suffer a lot, yes, but others will see the crisis as the beginning of a new economy. "Can we avoid it?" I asked. "No," Michael answered, "because it has already started. But they can transform it. They can choose who they will be when everything falls apart." Then he looked right into my soul. I felt as if my entire story, every tear, every mistake, every laugh was read by him in an instant. When you return, you will talk, not to impose, not to scare, but to remind them who they are, because every soul already knows it. It just needs someone to say it out loud. And then, with a bow that honored me without meriting it, Archangel Michael placed his hand on my chest, and I knew it was time to go back. After Archangel Michael placed his hand on my chest, I felt a wave of energy pass through me. It wasn't pain. It was as if my soul had been tuned like an instrument finding its original note again. Everything I had seen, the 3 events, the luminous valley, the hall of decisions, the suspended temple, my mother's face, the dark souls and forgiveness, all were imprinted on me with a clarity that no words can ever fully encompass. Knew the time had come to return. I looked for the last time at that plane of light where time does not exist, where the truth is not shouted, but felt, and something inside me begged to stay. But he also knew he had made a promise: return, count, prepare. The being of light, who had accompanied me from the beginning, approached once again. His form was no longer foreign, it was part of me. And this time he spoke to me with a soft voice like a breeze that caresses the thoughts. You won't remember everything right away. Matter confuses, but the soul will remember when it is time. When you speak, some will know it is true without knowing why. What if I'm afraid? I asked him. You will be afraid, and that's fine, but love will be stronger if you choose it every day. What if they call me crazy? Many will. Others will cry silently when listening to you. Don't talk to convince. Speak to sow. Then he showed me something last, a golden seed, small, luminous, floating in front of me. This is what you brought. It is not a vision. It is a frequency. Wherever you speak, where you write, where you are simply present, this seed will be activated. Don't force it. Just know. He took it with his hands of light and placed it inside me. In the center of what there was still my essence, and then the vertigo. An absurd speed, as if falling from the peak of existence towards the dense, the physical, the limited. I felt immense pressure. There was no air, there was no way. Just an impulse that dragged me down. And then darkness. And then sound, a high-pitched beep, distorted voices, a hum, and finally, pain. I opened my eyes. The white ceiling of a hospital, blurred faces. A nurse yelled something. A doctor put a light in my eyes. My chest burned. My throat was dry as stone. He was back. Days passed before he could speak clearly, and weeks before I dared to tell what I had experienced. The doctors said I was clinically dead for almost 4 minutes. They called me a miracle. But what I experienced was not a miracle, it was an instruction. Since then I have started writing everything down, to record, to talk to those who are willing to listen. I don't preach, I don't threaten. I'm just sharing what I saw, and I'm here telling all this before the Pope dies, before the 3 events occur, because when that happens, I want those who heard this to remember that they already knew. They had just forgotten, and that the chaos that will come will not be the end. It will be the call. Not a day goes by that I don't remember what I saw. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night with my heart racing, with the echo of voices that are not human resonating in my chest. Other times I am in the market walking among the people, and I feel their souls shouting things that their mouths cannot say. What is happening in the world? Why does everything feel so strange lately? Why do I have this constant anxiety for no reason? I know why. I can't say exactly when it will happen. They didn't give me dates. The times there are not like those here, but I know with a certainty that does not fit into my body that the 3 events are approaching, and I know because everything is lining up, because the world is already in tension, because every news story I read reminds me of what I saw in that mirror in the valley, because the atmosphere itself seems to hold its breath, like the exact moment before the thunder, and above all because the Pope ages in silence. I'm not talking about religion. I'm not interested in dogma, but I saw it. When that man closes his eyes, a door will open, not because of its human power, but because of its spiritual vibration. He is a figure of containment, an invisible wall that still holds certain threads of balance. And when that wall falls, humanity will face its harshest reflection. I know it sounds scary, but it's not, if you're awake. That's why I record these messages. That's why I write every night, even when tears fall on the keyboard. That's why I decided to speak, although I know that I risk ridicule, rejection, and silence. I don't mind. I can't be silent anymore. Because every person who hears this and feels it inside, even if they don't understand it immediately, is a seed that awakens. And when the blackout comes, I want you to know, it is not the end. It is the beginning of the necessary silence. And when conflicts arise, do not respond with hate. Don't let yourselves be divided. Talk to your neighbors. Embrace those who think differently. Protect yourselves from fear. And when the banks close and money loses its value, remember this: the soul is not listed on the stock market. What matters is not how much you have, but who you walk with. Sometimes I feel alone. Yes, being the bearer of such a vision is not a comfortable blessing. It's a burden. It's a fire in the chest that never goes out. It is a knowledge that cannot be unknown. But when I feel like this, I close my eyes, and I see the valley of light again, to the beings who guided me, to my mother, smiling silently, to Archangel Michael with his firm gaze. And then I take a deep breath, and I hope. Because the time will come when every word I say will make sense to those who now doubt. And when that happens, I will no longer be alone. We will be awake. Together. Together.